Hello and welcome to Farm Journal Live. I'm Clinton Griffiths here in the Farm Journal newsroom, giving you an update each and every day on the latest with the coronavirus outbreak and its potential impacts on agriculture. Today, let's start with a little bit of financial news. What's happening out there? Of course, we've got jobless claims coming out this morning, hitting a record 3.3 million filings this week. That comes from the Labor Department. It's more than double expectations. The number shatters the Great Recession peak of 665,000. from March of 2009, and it beats the all-time mark of 695,000 set back in October of 1982. Now, the largest economic rescue package in U.S. history, getting closer to the president's desk now. The U.S. House scheduled to vote on the measure today. The $2 trillion emergency plan would deliver desperately needed financial assistance to American workers and businesses devastated by the coronavirus. Now, specifically for farmers, the measure would allow the Commodity Credit Corporation to use as much as $14 billion in previous funding to reimburse net realized losses. $9.5 billion was allocated for the Office of the Secretary to provide aid to agricultural producers affected by the virus, which could help livestock producers, including dairy and specialty crop producers. The measure also includes forgivable loans for small businesses that would allow them to maintain workforces and cover other expenses like rent and utilities. Let's go ahead and bring in Farm Journal's Jim Wiesemeyer. And Jim, you've been covering this very closely. Talk to us a little bit more about these small business loans and what that may or may not mean for agriculture.
Well, frankly, I've spent most of my time on that because of the potential significance of that for farming operations and big farming operations with any significant amount of labor, Clinton. I know there's some stipulations in that program, but I would advise any viewer to contact their banker because they're familiar with this program. But the bottom line on that, it's $350 billion, as you said, and those loans would basically be grants or forgiven if those who qualify follow the requirements, Clinton. That's potential big news if we can jump through some hurdles to get the ag sector included in this.
Yeah, and it sounds like what that's going to be used for is basically to keep employees working through this thing, which, as we know, agriculture is considered essential right now.
Oh, absolutely. And again, just because there are requirements, I would tell again the viewers, don't give up because this could pump potentially billions of dollars of cash flow into the much needed cash flow ag sector. And this could also potentially be utilized by the ethanol industry. Again, we're checking into that.
Yeah.
So some other things I've been working on is that, of course, that $8.8 billion for child nutrition programs, including the school lunch program, and the $450 million for commodity purchases under the emergency food assistance through the food banks and other things. It's clear to me that USDA will soon come out with a fairly large purchase of dairy products in order to boost the slowing demand for dairy products as a result of all those school closings.
What about the rest of the money that we've talked about with the Commodity Credit Corporation, that $9.5 billion allocated for the Secretary's office? Where does that money, where do we see that going? How will that be used?
Well, it's going to be called something different, but utilizing the Commodity Credit Corporate Charter Act, CCC, with the additional borrowing authority of $14 billion, not the 20 that USDA and Senator John Hoeven, Republican from North Dakota, really wanted, but that'll serve as your basis of payment structure for a very likely new ag aid program sometime this summer. I don't think it's going to be called the MFP program because this would be more directed at the coronavirus impacts. On top of that, you have $9.5 billion, as you indicated, for other sectors, including dairy and cattle. So they can really target perhaps a direct payment program for those sectors.
Jim, of course, this is the Senate's version of the bill. The House still talking about it. Sounds like they may vote on it yet today. Where do we stand on that House bill, and will it look any different?
It looks like they're going to, I don't think it will be different. If it is, then we're going to have a delay again, and the financial markets would not like that. It's hard to Nancy Pelosi is Speaker of the House. It's like herding cats with some of her members, so they may want to play games, but it looks like they're going to vote on this in the House on Friday, and they want to stay out of town. So I know the Senate's out until at least April the 20th. So, bottom line, you're going to get this thing approved. Above and beyond the $2 trillion, Clinton, that's in this phase 3 rescue bill, is the $4 billion combined between Treasury and Fed when it comes to their tools, primarily into loans. And that's really to help liquefy our system, where the $2 trillion is primarily direct payments or cash flow. The $4 billion is more liquidity, but combined, that's $6 trillion. And that's why you're seeing the stock market finally going up here. And I think we're going to approach probably by tomorrow a 50% retracement of the down move.
Last question for you, Jim. How is Washington seeming to, I mean, it sounds like obviously we've got some big issues in different pockets of the country as we start to fight this coronavirus. Is there a consensus in Washington that this ultimately will help? Are we going to have to get past all of the shutdowns and basically having everybody self-quarantine and stay home before we start to see this money really shake loose?
Well, you're going to have to see if this money, it will work, but to what degree? Because a number of lawmakers, even on the floor last night in the Senate, said that has to be a phase 4, and that's where you'll very likely get additional ag aid, because you saw the ugliest of politics coming into play on the Senate relative to the CCC boost, where it was recommended to be 20, and Patrick Leahy, senator from Vermont, a Democrat, basically fought that and reduced it to $14 billion because he thought it was a Trump-oriented program to help the rural sector, his constituency. That's the ugly side of this one. So you will see more phases of this aid program, but let's see how this huge $2 trillion package works first.
All right, appreciate the insight as always, Jim. And Jim will be following along as we work to get through this on into the evening, as the House looks like they're going to be taking up this legislation. Let's get to some other news here. A developing story now. Cargill announcing plans to pay workers an additional $2 per hour and provide $500 bonus for employees working their schedules through May 3rd. Cargill's Daniel Sullivan telling our partners over at Drovers that employees are working hard to take care of the nation, so they're taking extra steps to care for them and their families, hoping to keep them on the job and keep that product flowing. Why don't we go ahead and bring in now Arlan Suderman with INTLFC Stone. Now, Arlan, you're joining us from our studios there in Kansas City. Let's talk about these markets. What are we seeing today? Where are we headed? A little bit different today than yesterday.
Oh, it really is. And we're going to see this kind of up and down market, give and take market for quite some time, I think, as the funds try to sort things out. Today, we've seen a little bit more pressure overall, but still we've seen lately the breaks have been bought. For quite a while, it was the funds just trying to dump everything of high risk. Now they're trying to come in and selectively find those assets or those sectors of assets that maybe have better opportunities at recovery than others. And the ag commodities, basically the food-based commodities outside of corn, have fared well with them to this point outside of the selling we saw earlier today.
You know, we had some export sales numbers come out today, kind of looking at the week and some of the shipments that we've been making. What's your impression? Looked like we had a few more sales to China.
Yeah, we really did. And most of those sales were known, but it kind of confirmed it. The wheat sales were a little bit stronger than what the trade was really aware of, but close to what our sources had told it'd be, getting up there close to that 17, 18 million bushels. Corn sales at just shy of 30 million bushels. We think there's another 50 million in demand there, maybe more depending on how things continue to play out inside of China. And overall, we see some real positives with China now starting to implement the phase 1 trade agreement.
And I think that's been a lot of the conversation that we've had over the last 18 months or so, and especially since January when we signed that phase 1 trade deal. You know, the question was, would it actually begin? Would those purchases begin? Do you see this as a sign that, yes, the phase 1 deal is being implemented and moving forward?
Yes, it's been delayed because of the coronavirus, but it is happening now. As China comes out of the virus, it is doing what it needs to do. USDA pulling its employees out of China because of the virus helped slow things down as well. One of the real keys that I've been watching is their purchases of distillers grains. Our people on the ground say there's a lot of demand for distillers grains, but we need to get those anti-dumping duties off. They tell us the paperwork is in process in China. That can take some time, but it is moving forward. And we see very encouraging signs of that. And of course, the ethanol industry could really use that boost. We see potential demand of 3 to 4 million metric tons.
Yeah, you know, Arlen, one last question here. I know we're waiting on the USDA's planning intentions report to come out next week. Do you think planning intentions have been changed or adjusted at all or much since this whole outbreak began?
Some more in the fringe of the Midwest and in the core of the Midwest. Farmers in the core of the Midwest feel like they have the best opportunity to yield their way out of the hole with corn better than soybeans. But in the fringes, that's where we're seeing the adjustments.
All right, appreciate it, Arlen. Thanks for jumping on here and filling us in on what's happening with markets today as we try to keep our arms wrapped around what's going on with this coronavirus. Remember, if you'd like to follow along with our coverage, we're writing new stories every hour that are going up. You can go to agweb.com/coronavirus to see the very latest and how it could be impacting you and rural America and this industry of agriculture that we all work so hard to keep moving and keep feeding the world and our country. Thank you for watching this Farm Journal Live. I'm Clinton Griffiths. Stay safe.